Hello, this is Alban from NORTHAN Viking Silver. Welcome back to this series of films about the history of runes and rune magic. So this film is Film 2, Part 2. And in this I'm going to look at what happens with runes after the year 1500. But before I get into that, I just want to recap and make clear about the different Futharks. So we've got the Elder Futhark, which is the 24-stay Futhark, which is used from when runes first start being used, up until 700 or 800. And then the Scandinavians, they developed the younger Futhark, which only has 16 runes. And so the Vikings are using the younger Futhark. And because nothing with runes is that simple, this younger Futhark is also split into two types. There's one type called the Danish runes or the long branch runes. There's another type called the Swedo-Norse runes or short twig runes. And actually when they get into the Middle Ages, they start to add some dots to the runes and they add some extra characters to help them with the spelling. But anyway, the basic types are Elder Futhark and Younger Futhark. Okay, so as I said in the previous film, runes really flourished amongst the Vikings, which shows they must have had a pretty high level of literacy at the time. So I just want to have a look at some of those later inscriptions. Runestones are a good example of this literacy. They're very popular in the Viking Age, particularly towards the end of the Viking Age, often embellished with these fantastic dragon patterns, and they're mostly memorial stones, not gravestones, memorial stones. They commemorate the dead, and the inscriptions are usually something pretty simple like such and such, this is to remember such and such who died, the stone was set up by his father or his comrade. To give you a specific example, there was a stone found in Hällestad in Sweden. Please excuse my Swedish pronunciation. This stone is, the runes tell us that it's a memorial set up by a man called Askell in memory of his fallen lord, Toki Gormson. And then the runes add, "He did not flee from the battle at Uppsala. Comrades set up this stone on a hill, strengthened with runes, for their brother. They stuck by Gorm's Toki." So this is like a public statement set up by Toki's friends to say they did not desert him in the battle. Another example of a stone, we have one put up by one Arnstein for his son Bior, and then the runes add, "He was killed in the guard when Knut attacked England." Oh, and there are some great examples of inscriptions from the 12th century. On the Isle of Orkney, there is a Stone Age burial chamber at Maes Howe, and some 12th century Scandinavian crusaders broke into this chamber in search of treasure. Well, they were disappointed, but they must have spent some time there because they scrawled a lot of runic inscriptions on the walls, which can still be read today. So they wrote their names, they complained about the lack of treasure, and one of them said, "Many a proud woman has bent down low in here." Actually, we have a lot of examples of this graffiti type inscriptions from the later runes, which I'll come back to in a later film, and they get pretty dirty, I have to warn you. Okay, but on the whole, as I said, runes die out as a form of writing by the end of the Viking Age, except for being used by Norwegian merchants all the way up to 1500, but then they too stop using them and runes fall into disuse. There are a couple of obscure examples of them still being used. For instance, there's a type of calendar from Norway that's carved into a stick with runes on, and these calendars were used as a way of calculating Easter. And there are one or two other obscure finds. But it's difficult to tell with these later finds if they're runes still in use or runes coming back into use. Let me explain what I mean. So, at the end of the Middle Ages, this Germanic culture of the migration period and the early Middle Ages it's kind of died out, and it's been superseded by the new Romance culture that's coming in from countries like France. No more old heroic legends, now it's tales of courtly love and knights in armour, and the old heroic legends are forgotten, or they're just half remembered in folk tales. No one's written this stuff down for centuries, and then the Renaissance happens and the Reformation. Almost no one remembers the stories of the old gods and heroes. Well, that could have been it for Germanic culture sliding into oblivion. But it wasn't. Why not? Well, we have those 17th and 18th century antiquarians to thank for this. They started to dig around, and discover old manuscripts in church libraries, or they found a book of sagas in an old Icelandic farmhouse, and they started to piece together this lost culture. There was suddenly a great enthusiasm for rediscovering a northern culture that would rival the classical culture that was so dominant. So part of this antiquarian interest in this old lost culture are runes, and they also came back into use thanks to the antiquarians. But you can't really call this an unbroken tradition. It's more like a rediscovered tradition or a recreated tradition. I think this revival of Germanic culture is fascinating, because we're still part of it today. Thanks to these antiquarians finding these old manuscripts and collecting them and publishing them, and then thanks to the philologists, because they're the guys who actually pieced together these old languages so that we could understand them again, thanks to them, these old forgotten legends came back into our culture. We can continue to tell or retell those old stories now in our own ways. So we have Wagner's Ring Cycle, we have Marvel's Mighty Thor, we have heavy metal lyrics inspired by this stuff, and we have countless books and films inspired by these old stories, and they're living once again. They're once again permeating our culture. Okay, and part of this, of course, is the reinvention of runes and the reinvention of runes for rune magic. This is something I'll look at in a later film when I start to look at the magical inscriptions themselves. So that's it for now. This is the end of this film. The next one is going to be about what runes were actually used for through their history before I get into the use of magic. See you then.